information that you can use. We're coming to you from the RREA.com studio over in Spring, Texas. And if you're a homeowner, you're going to be very interested in hearing from our guest today. We're going to be talking with our Harris County tax assessor collector later in this show. But first, we're going to talk with Jim Robinson from the Tax Appraisal Office and find out how Harris County is coming up with our property taxes. So it's going to be very interesting. If you're driving and you can't take any notes or want to find out more, you can go to our website at rrea.com/radio. And there you can also watch videos of the segments that we produce. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Shannon. Glad to be here.
You know, it's very interesting. Just the whole tax appraisal district. It's kind of a mystery to a lot of people. You know, they get their taxes in the mail, but they don't know a whole lot about it. Tell us what you do.
Well, the appraisal district, there's one set up for each county in the state. And the job of the appraisal district is to appraise all taxable property at its January 1st market value. And that really is not for the purpose of setting how much tax somebody's going to pay, but it's to allocate the tax burden. And the theory being that if all property is properly appraised at what it was worth, what it would sell for, then the burden is fairly distributed among property owners, and nobody pays more or less than his or her fair share. So that's what we do. We both appraise that property for tax purposes. We also are charged not with deciding what kinds of exemptions that a given county or city or school district gives, but once they've decided they're going to give an exemption, then to determine who's eligible for that exemption.
And what are the various exemptions out there? I think most people know about the homestead exemption. What others are there?
Well, the residence homestead is the most important. Harris County, for example, the county itself gives a 20% homestead exemption, and they give much larger exemptions then for over 65 people or for people who are disabled. Almost all of the school districts give at least some level of exemption. The city of Houston has a 20% homestead plus an over 65 and disability. Really, we've got over 500 different taxing jurisdictions in this county, more than 300 utility districts, for example, all of which levy a tax. So depending on what combination a person lives in, everybody's going to be in the county, everybody's going to be in a school district. You might be in a community college district, you might be in a MUD, you might not be. Everybody's in the Port of Houston Authority, everybody's in flood control. So what we do, we aggregate, we look at all of the exemptions that each of those entities that you're located in give, and then once the person has qualified by filing the application, then we grant that exemption, and you automatically then receive whatever each of those jurisdictions has allowed.
A lot of times, I know when we resell houses, well, really any house, when you're selling a house, you give the new buyers their homestead exemption paperwork at closing, and a lot of them just set all that aside and forget about it. If you don't know whether you have actually filed your homestead exemption or not, how could you find out? How would you know?
Well, it's pretty easy to check. You can go on to the Harris County Appraisal District's website, which is www.HCAD, the initials for Harris County Appraisal District.org, and we have the ability to search the records. You can look up either by owner's name or you can look up by property address, and that will show what the current value is of that property. It also will list what exemptions are on the property. Now, you mentioned about resale homes. If you buy a house and the owner already has a homestead exemption on it, the new owner gets to keep that for the rest of that year. But then they've got to requalify themselves the following year. What the law says is to be eligible for the homestead exemption, you have to own the property on January 1st, you have to occupy it as your principal place of residence, and you can't claim a homestead anywhere else, not only in Texas, but anywhere else in the United States.
Oh, well, so you really can only have one.
You can only have one.
Well, and how do you assess the values of properties? Because I know sometimes, there are a lot of consumers out there who feel like they're overtaxed. They feel like their property taxes are too high. How do you assess those values? How do you come up with those?
Well, we look at the market itself. It's the market that determines, what the appraisal is going to be. we've divided for residential purposes. And of course, residential property is not the only kind of property that's taxable. Industrial property, utilities, business personal property, which would be, for example, the inventory in Macy's, all those things are taxable as well. But for residential property, we've divided Harris County into well over 1,000 what we call valuation neighborhoods. And a valuation neighborhood is an area where the properties are pretty much comparable. They have the same general amenities, usually the same schools, they're in the same jurisdictions, and we look at the sales that occur that are close to the January 1st assessment date that have occurred in that valuation neighborhood, and then we compare what those properties sold for to what properties that didn't sell that are comparable sold for.
I think that's really interesting because a lot of buyers don't realize that they may be looking at houses in 3 or 4 different neighborhoods and trying to narrow it down. And I think that taxes is one thing that you really need to look at because it can vary in very close neighborhoods.
Well, yeah, it can vary considerably, and this is particularly true in utility districts. There are some utility districts that have quite high tax rates. There's others that are, say it's a mature utility district that's been around for a long time. It typically was going to have a low rate because they've paid their bonds off that they used to put in the streets and the utilities and so forth. So yeah, that is an important thing to look at. And since there are over 500 different jurisdictions, and everybody, as I said, is going to be in some combination of those, so it would be well to look at the rates. And we don't set the rates. The rates are set by the elected governing bodies of each of those entities.
And a lot of people decide that they want to protest their taxes. They get them, they feel like they're too high. And I know that there are a lot of companies out there that you can use to help you protest your taxes. How do you feel about those? What do you think about those companies?
Well, I think that the majority of them seek to do a good job for their clients, but I think the thing that people ought to take into consideration before they decide to use a tax consultant or a tax agent is that usually those companies charge a 50% contingency fee. We've looked at the records of protests done by tax consultants versus those done by homeowners themselves. Consultants really on average don't do any better than the homeowner does. In fact, in many cases, the homeowner has better results because they know more about their property than the consultant. And since the consultant charges usually that 50% fee, they've got to get twice the reduction that the homeowner might get for the homeowner to come out even.
Sure, yeah. I think a lot of people probably don't realize that. I think a lot of people don't know the process on how to go in and fight the taxes, and it's a hassle. They have to take off work and go do it, so it's just easier to hire a company to do it. What is the process? I mean, if you want to do it, can you walk us through the steps on how to protest our taxes?
Oh, sure. And of course, now remember, it's, a lot of people come down and they'll say, hey, there's nothing wrong with my value. I'm here, my taxes are too high. And there's really nothing we can do about it if the taxes are too high, because remember, there's 2 components to that. One is the value. The other is the rates that all those different jurisdictions have set, which we have no say-so over whatsoever. But let's assume that, for sake of illustration, that you have a home and we've overappraised it. We sent out the notice and you look and maybe you just bought it 6 months ago and you paid way less than we have it appraised for. Okay, we'll send you your notice of appraised value. Those typically go in the mail in early April. And a lot of people, if they're going to file a protest, use what we call the iFile system. We were the first appraisal office in the United States to give people the ability to protest online. On that notice of appraised value, there, in addition to the account number, there's a unique iFile number that's printed, and that really is your individual password for that year. And you can go to the Harris County Appraisal District website, go to the area that's for records, enter your account number, and then enter the iFile number, and that gives you the ability to, if you wish to do so, to file a protest online. You can fill out a form online that indicates the things that you think that we need to know about your property that would make you and us believe it's not worth what we've appraised it for. And if we agree with that particular documentation that you presented, we'll send you an email back in a relatively short period of time telling you, yeah, we've agreed, we've either accepted the value that you've proposed, or we'll suggest a value. If we don't think we can make a reduction, we'll let you know by email, but you still have your opportunity for a hearing before the Appraisal Review Board. Now, the Appraisal Review Board is a separate body from the Appraisal District. The hearings are done at our offices, but the Appraisal Review Board, it has 175 citizen members. We don't even appoint them. They're appointed by the district judges in Harris County. They serve 2-year terms, a maximum of 3 2-year terms. And the ARB sits in panels of 3 to hear protests that the appraisal district can't resolve. Now, the fact is we do resolve the majority of protests informally, where
that's good, so that people don't have to come down and protest in person.
We either resolve it, through the iFile system,
yeah,
and the associated iSettle system, or people come down they get a chance for an informal meeting first, and that's where we either resolve most of them through iSettle or the informal meeting. But if we can't resolve it, then it's scheduled for the Appraisal Review Board, and you have your chance to give your evidence there.
Okay, we're going to be right back after this commercial break, and we'll finish talking about that whole process for lowering your taxes if you need to.
Great.